Hello, I'm Martin Stringer, and this is PrimeTime Politics on CPAC. The House of Commons is back after this week's speech from the throne. Our MPs panel will discuss the first order of business, replacing those CERB payments, which come to an end this weekend. And what about that upcoming confidence vote, which follows the speech? How close is the NDP to supporting the government and avoiding a fall election? Our journalist panel will also look at the politics and the pandemic, the government's biggest political challenges as the second wave of the coronavirus hits Canada. But we start with Prime Minister Trudeau, who today announced that Canada has secured additional commitments for several million more doses of vaccines from companies working on vaccine candidates. The government says that new agreements have been signed that mean that Canada will have a guaranteed access of up to 282 million doses of the various vaccine candidates if they are successful and when they become available. Here is Prime Minister Trudeau making that announcement on Friday.
Canadians must have access to a safe and effective vaccine against COVID-19 as quickly as possible, no matter where it was developed. Today, I can announce that we've reached an agreement with AstraZeneca for the vaccine they are developing with the University of Oxford. This agreement secures up to 20 million doses for Canadians should the vaccine trials be successful.
Well, joining me now are three MPs from the major parties. Adam van Koeverden is the Liberal MP for the Ontario riding of Milton, and he's Parliamentary Secretary to two ministers. Michael Barrett is a Conservative MP for the Ontario riding of Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes, and he's his party's ethics critic. And Rachel Blaney is the NDP whip and the member for the BC riding of North Island, Powell River. All three of you, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Okay, first of all, I want to start with something that happened today. Michael Barrett, your caucus, your party, today tried to get the House to sit on Sunday to debate Bill C-2, the government's changes to EI, and the new benefits which would replace the CERB program. But you wanted the House to sit on Sunday. What was that all about?
Look, this program, the CERB program, is coming to an end, and Canadians who are using the program are worried about what's going to come next. Over the last 6 weeks, the Liberal government has done nothing to reassure Canadians, to put in place a program that would support them. And now, at the 11th hour, they're looking to, have MPs, pass legislation in an expedited manner when they've been sitting on their hands for the last 6 weeks. They prorogued Parliament. The only reason being is for Justin Trudeau to hide from his scandals. And so, if we're going to give serious consideration to legislation that the government's putting forward and needs to pass, then let's do that. And the proposal that we made to the government was eminently reasonable and would have given an opportunity for all parliamentarians to scrutinize this legislation and to question ministers.
Okay, Adam van Koeverden, your Liberals and the other parties did not give unanimous consent to this to sit on Sunday. The minister wants to get this debate started on Monday. So what's your hope, and is it for an expedited debate? Is it for a one-day debate, as you've had over the past few months with many of the big pieces of legislation?
Well, quite frankly, I think I speak for MPs across the country, regardless of party affiliation or where you sit, that none of us have been sitting on our hands. I'm a little bit insulted to hear Mr. Barrett suggest that MPs have been sitting on their hands, because none of us have been. We've all been working hard, some of us in Ottawa and some of us in our constituencies, to ensure that Canadians have what they need. And it's taken the last couple of weeks to redefine exactly what the path forward is going to look like for Canadians. And, we heard the throne speech on just this week, and we were looking for support to make sure that we can continue to serve Canadians. CERB was an effective program. CEVA has been an effective program. CEWS has been an effective program. We've been keeping Canadian industries, Canadian families, Canadian workers, and everybody across the country from coast to coast to coast afloat during this pandemic. It is still an emergency situation, and we are absolutely focused on finding solutions, and the CBA program is a good one that will continue. I keep hearing that CERB is ending, but we know exactly what is happening, and CRB is coming into effect, and we're asking for support. We're asking the Conservatives to come and support Canadians over the next 26 weeks, because there's so much that we don't know going forward. But what we do know is that COVID-19 is here to stay for a little while longer, and we need to work as a Team Canada approach.
Okay.
I would just say again.
Why did you?
Okay,
put
no,
Team
Rachel.
Canada on
No,
the
sorry,
bench?
Rachel. I want to go to Rachel Blaney because obviously I want to talk about just this debate over Sunday sitting and the bill itself. We'll get into the details of the bill and where you stand on the bill. But Rachel Blaney, your party didn't feel that it was necessary to sit on Sunday. Are you willing to entertain? We know that the minister would like to have a quick debate on this, as you did on some of the other major measures, possibly even voting on a fast track that would allow it to be passed in one day. What's the NDP's position on how you're going to deal with this bill?
So I want to be very clear. The NDP did not raise any concerns about moving forward on Saturday. The reality is, with the government choosing to prorogue, and I want to remind Canadians that we were days away from having Parliament do one of the summer sittings when they made that decision. You know, for me, that was a key time. And that simply did not happen. So when we talk about this, this is really about Canadians who are concerned. They don't know how they're going to make ends meet at the end of the month. The timeline is running short, and we need to get those services out quickly. And the government made a decision to not do the work that should have been done in August.
Okay, let's look at what's the most important thing, and that is all of the Canadians who are watching this. The CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, does come to an end on the 26th, this weekend. It will be replaced. 3/4 of the people receiving it will receive EI. Bill C2 proposes changes to EI, which would mean that no one coming off the CERB and going on EI would make less on EI than they did on the CERB, but it also contains 3 other Canada recovery benefits, one for people who don't qualify for EI, who are self-employed or in the gig economy, one for caregivers who are forced to stay at home, and one for a 2-week benefit for those who are self-isolating or who are ill. That's all in Bill C2. Let's start with you, Rachel Blaney. Is the NDP predisposed to support this bill, this essential bill to replace CERB and create these 3 new Canada recovery benefits?
Well, at the end of the day, the NDP has been very firm through this process. We want to make sure that Canadians are getting the resources that they need. And if we look at the history of what happened through COVID-19, what we see is in the beginning, of course, the Liberals were saying, hey, we're going to open up EI, but forgot that there were many Canadians who can't access EI. So we pushed hard and the CERB was born. It is the same as the wage subsidy. I don't know if everybody remembered, it started out at 10%. The NDP fought to get that up to 75%. So we're looking into the details of the bill. You know, we're going to continue to have discussions. We were very concerned that the government was indicating that they were going to cut the amount. So I'm not sure how in the first wave, members of Canadian society needed 2,000 and then they needed less in the future.
Right,
so
but you know what the minister's suggesting. Well, you know what the minister's suggesting. She was very public about it yesterday. Are you predisposed to support the bill as it is? No one would make less than they're making on CERB, and you saw all these other things that I described. Are you leaning towards supporting the bill?
We are still looking into it, and we'll get back to you very soon. At the end of the day, what we really care about is that the Canadians get the resources that they need. And when they continue to split it up into many factors, often we see Canadians left behind. We want to make sure that that is not the case, and we will be looking into that.
Okay, Michael Barrett, on this bill that a lot of Canadians are watching with great interest, is your party predisposed? Is your party leaning towards supporting it? Replacement, EI changes, nobody would make less than CERB, and 3 other categories of benefits which would equal CERB, including basically a paid sick leave. Is your party going to support it or not?
Look, we've asked for an opportunity this weekend to study this bill, to question ministers, frankly, to do our job. And this is a classic example of the Trudeau Liberals playing politics with an issue that requires this Team Canada approach that Adam was just talking about. And instead of taking that approach, they slammed the door on Parliament 6 weeks ago, the day before we were to meet as a committee of the whole to talk about what the issues are that are facing Canadians.
Okay, on Monday, can we go ahead to Monday, right? Monday,
we have this bill that was
introduced
introduced yesterday.
Right.
We have this bill that was introduced yesterday, and we know exactly what they're going to say. Well, you're either with us or against us. We're looking for unanimous consent. Well, that's not the normal process. There's been all kinds of time. Bills, the process requires committee study. The process requires proper scrutiny. We're going to do our job, and we're looking for opportunities to help the Liberals get a better outcome. Conservatives made positive contributions to these discussions in the past, and Canadians got better outcomes as a result. We're looking for that opportunity again.
On the face of it, are you leaning towards supporting the bill?
We're going to do our job, and we're going to review the legislation and make recommendations based on our review to make it better, to make sure Canadians aren't getting left behind, which has been the track record of the Trudeau Liberals. If left to their own devices, if not listening to opposition parties, there are worse outcomes for Canadians. We're going to work hard to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, Adam van Koeverden, is your understanding that the minister, if she doesn't get a fast track and a one-day kind of approach, that you will have enough time to hear from the opposition parties, to entertain their thoughts, to hear witnesses, and to go over this bill? Is your understanding that there will be enough time to properly debate and look at the bill?
Well, I certainly hope there's enough time, because Canadians are depending on us, and Canadians are depending on us to go fast. And government is not famous for going quickly, but we have in the past 7 months now gone very quickly. And I'm grateful that Ms. Blaney is, rightfully so, taking credit for making some constructive criticisms and improving some of the programs as we go. And I'm thinking that we're looking for the same kind of constructive criticism from the Conservatives and Mr. Barrett, so that we can continue to work forward, and that we can depoliticize and take away the partisan aspects of this conversation, because COVID-19 is not a partisan issue. It's not a political issue. It's something that requires a Team Canada approach. And thank you, Michael, for joining us in that. It's really important that we work together. And whether that's in the House of Commons or offline, and thinking about ways that we can continue to support Canadians, there are no good ideas that are going by the wayside. I welcome any and all criticism and critiques, ideas to make it better, smoother, but the honest truth is what we've been hearing from Mr. Barrett and the Conservatives, within 3 minutes of the throne speech, they said that it was impossible to support it. They said that they didn't hear the word agriculture at the same time as the Canadian Agriculture Federation was tweeting their support for it with regards to farmer compensation and resilient food chain. So, look, I think that the Canadians are, whether you're Conservative, NDP, Liberal, or otherwise, they're relying on our government. They're relying on every member of Parliament to work together, and I used to work with my opposition all the time as an athlete, and I think it's possible as a parliamentarian. So I welcome members of all party stripes to come forward with their great ideas and contribute to this awesome program that's going to continue to support Canadians through this challenging time.
You set up the big question that goes back to Rachel Blaney. Rachel Blaney, Peter Van Dusen on this set yesterday spoke with your leader, Jagmeet Singh, about where you are at as a caucus in terms of supporting the government, in terms of avoiding an election and supporting the government in the confidence vote, which will come after the speech from the throne. How close are you to giving your support to deciding to vote for the confidence vote and prevent an election? We've been told that you got what you wanted in terms of in terms of almost everything, and it's just the fine points on a paid national sick leave.
Well, and that paid national sick leave is very important. It's important all the time. During COVID, of course, like so many realities across Canada, we have seen the challenges that Canadians face in a new way. They were already there, but COVID-19 opened up the doors to the inequalities that we see across our country. So what we're really looking for is action, and that's the important part, action that supports Canadians. It supports them individually in their home life. It supports seniors. It supports small businesses and medium-sized businesses across this country if we're going to continue on forward. And that sick leave is a major part of that. There are a lot of Canadians historically who've gone to work sick because they don't have access to any other resource. And so this is going to make a difference, especially for COVID, but into the future as well. And I think that will be our sticking point. This should not just be a COVID step. This should be a national step for every Canadian. So you're saying
that, we heard from the minister that it was only a matter of actual application, that you were seeing eye to eye, the NDP and the Liberals, on Bill C2 effectively contains a national paid sick leave for 2 weeks at least. How close are you?
Well, we're still looking after you really have to take the time to go through the bill carefully. We take that very seriously, and we will be letting Canadians know as soon as we get back to the House next week. And Michael Barrett, just to be fair, no secret in where you stand in terms of the confidence motion?
Right. This is a classic case of second verse, same as the first. This is a bunch of recycled Liberal promises, many of which they've broken before. The same can be expected of them again. Adam mentioned some of the criticism Conservatives have for the throne speech. One of my criticisms include veterans, one of many groups who are left out by this government. There's so many Canadians who are being left behind, and they took 6 weeks. They shut down Parliament. They shut down committees for 6 weeks so that Justin Trudeau and his team could hide from the investigations into corruption in his government, instead of letting parliamentarians work to improve outcomes for all Canadians, for people in the agriculture sector, for people who are, struggling to get their minivan through the winter, but are being told by the Liberals, "Oh, don't worry about your minivan. We're gonna subsidize an electric vehicle for you." Like this is classic, elitism from the Liberals. We know you're hungry. Let them eat cake. We want an approach for this country, for Canadians, that brings everyone up to the same level.
Okay.
And this approach from the Liberals is not going to do that.
Okay, on that, we're going to have to wrap it up, but we will have a chance to talk about this again. I want to thank all three of you and wish you a productive next few weeks as we have the return to Parliament. Thanks for speaking with us.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Canadians are depending on us to work together.
Well, to look at the return of Parliament, the big issues and the politics of the pandemic, I'm joined now by three journalists. Tonda MacCharles is a parliamentary reporter for the Toronto Star. She joins me from Ottawa. Right. Mia Rabson is a national reporter for the Canadian Press. She's in Ottawa. And Andray Domise is a contributing editor to Maclean's magazine and an op-ed writer for the Globe and Mail. And he joins me from Toronto. All three of you, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
okay,
having us.
I want to start with what we've had a lot of comment in the last 2.5 days, but I want to let you open up with your reflections on what you make, with a bit of time and a bit of reflection, what you make of the throne speech. What stands out for you? What would you point to? What is significant? Start with you, Tonda.
I guess I'd say that, first of all, I think it took them a long time to get there, to a place where they reiterated a lot of the priorities we've heard. So I think what stood out for me, though, was their commitment to do things that really aren't their responsibility to do right yet, just now. I mean, they need the provinces to do some of the biggest pieces: childcare, long-term care for seniors, and pharmacare. And those are significant pieces of their plan to address all the gaps that COVID showed up. But they really have a lot of work ahead of them to do that with the provinces, and they've already angered the provinces, because what they haven't done is committed to increase healthcare funding. They will meet to talk about it, but that commitment wasn't there. And I got to say that the childcare piece and everything around COVID is really the only thing that's on people's mind right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mia, weigh in. What stands out for you?
It might be my current obsession right now with everything going around with the pandemic, but the 1 or 2 lines that he mentioned about rapid testing and the need to get rapid testing out there, it is the only issue that I'm hearing about. Mm-hmm. And to me, it doesn't matter if we have childcare. It almost doesn't matter if we have pharmacare. If we can't get people tested quickly and back in school and back at work, this pandemic is not going to be under control. And it surprised me a little that there was so little focus on that, when it just seems to be such a critical element, the testing and tracing plans to keeping a handle on this pandemic.
It is interesting, because as we watch province by province the updates, the provincial leaders and the health authorities are being swamped with that issue. Andray, what stands out when you look at the whole scope of the speech? What stands out to you?
Well, I noticed that the Prime Minister said that now is not the time for austerity policy, and I certainly hope he will stick to that point of view. The one thing that I was a little bit concerned with is the means by which CERB is going to be phased out, and moving towards a emphasis on wage subsidy and expanding the EI system for people who may not even qualify for it in the first place. Mm-hmm. I think one of the important facets right now, especially as there are so many millions of Canadians that have lost jobs, or furloughed, or unable to find work, is to move away from this sort of means-tested model of finding a way to create income for people, and moving towards something that looks a little bit more like UBI, or perhaps even better, the Guaranteed Livable Basic Income. Mm-hmm. I think that with so many people facing this kind of economic anxiety right now, one of the most important things to do is to make sure that people are able to eat and to live.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Let's look at the pure politics of it, because I know, Tonda, you've documented the tensions that this has caused between the federal government and the provinces. And Mia, you're talking about the biggest political headache right now, which is testing. And Andray, you talk about the economic, how to make people whole. The politics of this 6-week hiatus that we've had in proroguing Parliament and producing a throne speech. Is the Prime Minister now, is Justin Trudeau where he wants to be politically? Tonda.
Well, I mean, if you count the fact that he succeeded in shutting down the committees for 6 weeks that were looking into the ethical issues around how he did some of the pandemic spending on the student volunteer program with the We Charity organization, yeah, he's where he wanted to be because that's been off the radar. Meanwhile, what is on the radar and what has continued to accelerate to be on the radar of everyone, like Mia just said, is actually pandemic, COVID. How do I get my kids back into school? How can I get to work if I can't get my kids into school? If they've got the sniffles, they can't get tested. So he's actually not where he needs to be politically, because what he needs to be at a place where he knows that people have confidence in him. And I think that 6 weeks hiatus has actually shaken their confidence. How is it that 6 months into this pandemic, testing is not something that's being rolled out smoothly? How is it that they don't have the plans in place, the people in place, the testing facilities in place? It really does beggar belief.
Okay, I know that Tonda and Mia, you both were reporting yesterday on the testing issue, and today again. And there was the issue where Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, was asked about it, and she said, we're not going to accelerate testing. We're not going to intervene politically in the testing, or else we'll become like other countries. And I think she was making a very unveiled allusion to the FDA in the United States, how there's been political interference. But where do they go with the testing? Again, the Prime Minister was asked about faster testing methods and Health Canada's responsibility. Mia, weigh in on that.
One of the things that people have been talking to me about when it comes to this testing issue is that the government is not thinking outside the box. They are sort of following their usual regulatory processes. And I don't think anyone wants Health Canada to approve tests that would be harmful to people. But several epidemiologists have raised the point that there are ways they can maybe use these tests differently, thinking outside the box, beyond just this standing in line and getting a test where you get a result in a couple of days, because there is nothing about this country that can function if all of us are waiting in line for hours and can't go to work, our kids can't go to school. It's a massive headache. And I think for so many people, it feels like we shut down in March. We were not necessarily happy to do it, but we were willing to do it, believing that we were going to buy the time to get ready for what was coming later. And now we're feeling like that was all for naught. And that is the problem politically that the Prime Minister is facing right now. We were having the same conversations, asking the same questions we were asking 6 months ago, and they still don't have answers.
I think a lot of us are finding an echo in Ontario too, for example, in March and April in Ontario, when there was such incredible restrictions on who could get tested because they didn't have the capacity. Andray, you mentioned, and you've zoomed in immediately on the economic aspect and helping people economically. I'll let you choose between both the other pandemic issues or the economic issue. With my MPs, I just spoke about the replacement for the CERB. It would seem that they are going to EI. EI is going to make people whole. People are not going to earn less on EI than they did on CERB. And there's these 3 new programs that are going to be introduced: the recovery benefits, Canada Emergency Recovery Benefits. What do you make of the economic means or of the other aspects of the pandemic?
Well, to touch on the testing aspect, I mean, I find it a little bit concerning that there are countries that are the fraction the size of ours, both in terms of population and in terms of economic size, that have been able to make fairly good recoveries by, as my colleague just mentioned, thinking outside the box, finding new ways to roll out testing, to make sure that the testing comes to the people rather than the other way around. Yeah. Where it comes to the economic aspect, one of the things that I'm really wary of with any sort of expansion on EI or even any further steps that may be taken in the future is, well, where is the money coming from? And what we haven't heard yet is the revenue aspect. Where is the revenue for this expansion going to come from? And I realize that the Prime Minister has said that it's not going to come off the backs of the middle class, but at what point do the upper 1% and the 1% of the 1% begin to pay their fair share? We've had multiple scandals with Revenue Canada, with the Paradise Papers, et cetera, where we've found that the richest Canadians are able to skate without paying the tax bill. So at what point do we start looking at, for example, clamping down on the capital gains exemption? At what point do we start looking at tax on financial transactions, et cetera, whereas the upper 1% are able to get by without paying their fair share?
Okay, last word to all three of you. I think, in a way, you've gotten to it already. I was going to ask, what's the biggest challenge, given that the pandemic, it's the pandemic, nothing but what's the biggest challenge that this Prime Minister is going to face over the next few weeks? Tonda.
Gee, if you're talking short-term, next few weeks, I think his biggest challenge is dealing with the provinces. On the one hand, he wants to basically say, we've given the provinces money for testing. We are doing everything we can to rush testing out the door once things are approved, vaccines and other medicines as well. But as much as he is now kind of fobbing that off on the provinces and has already given them billions, he needs their cooperation on so many levels every week. So that's going to be a huge challenge. He's angering them right now. I think you will see that working relationship, that smooth flow of political conversation, I think that's grinding to a halt. And I think there's a lot of bad will building up.
And that's even before they have the sit-down about healthcare funding. He has promised to have a First Minister's meeting. Okay, Mia, what would you say? I mean, you can make it either short-term or long-term.
Well, I mean, short term, I think I agree with Tonda. The premiers are a big problem. He seems to have managed to convince the NDP to support him. They haven't 100% said they'll vote for the throne speech yet, but that seems to be where they're leaning. So he looks like he will survive short term. He also has an economic statement coming up this fall. They haven't been clear about exactly what that's going to be. Is that going to be another confidence vote? But looking ahead long term, this is a prime minister who wants to go the distance. He would love to sit here for 4 years. Has he done the work to bring the parties on side and actually discuss and communicate with them to survive not just a confidence vote next week, but one in the spring that's likely to come on a budget and in the years to come. And he doesn't seem to have developed those kinds of relationships that they were expecting. Okay,
Andray, your prognostication, your prediction of what you think, or what your diagnosis of what you think is going to be the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I would say that nobody, in any facet of government would want to be in this position. I mean, BC Premier John Horgan called a snap election this past week, and people were absolutely livid. So I don't know that anybody in any party wants to go to the polls. I think that long term, there does have to be a higher emphasis on being able to work with the opposition parties. That there has to be a stronger emphasis on working with the provinces, especially as Mia pointed out on the healthcare aspect. But long term, we can't even predict what's going to happen a week from now. We can't predict what's happening 6 months from now. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride for every single one of us. Mm-hmm. So I say for the time being, what we have to look at is when the economic plan comes out, where is the revenue coming from, and what sort of assistance will be rendered to the provinces. Okay, well, all three of you, listen, I want to thank you very much. Very interesting. We will watch this with great interest. Tonda, Mia, and Andray, thanks for speaking with us.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have for this edition of Primetime Politics, the weekend edition. I'm Martin Stringer on behalf of all of us here at CPAC. Thanks for watching, and have a great, safe weekend.